Do you go by Max or Maximilian?
I go by Max. Saves time.
Max? Okay. Okay, good. So why don't you just start by letting us know what factors inspired you to select your current career?
Sure. Um, so first off, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me tonight. My name is Maximilian Ray Sugiura, principal at the High School of Art and Design. So I've worked in education now for the better part of 16 years. The thing that drew me to this trade was partially my own family history in education. I've always known I wanted to be a teacher, but I actually worked in the private sector, getting business experience in operations management and marketing before I transitioned to a career in education. Um, the thing is, it's almost less important about like how I got into it more than like what keeps me in it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I became really passionate about teaching, the art of teaching, how to be more effective and efficient as a communicator, how to understand folks in different developmental processes. And all that happened through a lot of hands-on instruction. I'm a teaching fellow. So I got thrown, right into the fire with that program. For those who don't know, it's a program designed to get folks into the workforce immediately while taking a master's program simultaneously for their first 2 years. So it was a lot, but that program helped kind of frame a lot of the issues that I'd be running into as a new teacher. But there's no substitute for experience. So I want to kind of like reiterate the thing that kept me interested is that there's never 2 days that are the same, even if you have the same lesson plan, right? On a day-to-day, class-to-class basis, different things will come up. People will react differently. You'll teach things differently. You'll find, I think, points if you're passionate about it, which I hope you are. You'll find points of connection in what you're teaching to new and almost abstract ideas sometimes that are just very exciting that you'll want to share with people. And I think that's the joy in the work is really like even now in an administrative role, finding time and opportunity to teach because that's the thing that brings me joy specifically is seeing people have that aha moment and being able to form those connections for themselves. Things that I now do organically, they get the practice with. And it doesn't really matter what the discipline is either. I started off as a special education teacher, and I think it's also important for anyone going into the business to work with the folks who have the highest needs first. And I know that's not really like an maybe an easy pathway for people, but it's been so important in terms of how I build up information and complexity so that I can hopefully get people at any level to understand what it is that I'm trying to communicate. So that's all been part of the process. And I know sometimes I get tangential, so I want to apologize in advance for going like off question.
No,
But
that's okay. No, I love that. Um, and just because we do have a little bit more time, how difficult was it for you to get to the level of principal? How many years before you kind of were able to reach that level?
yeah, I taught for 6.5. I was an assistant principal for 3.5, and I've now been a principal for 4.5. So everything in stages. It is helpful. I'm impatient, but it is helpful really to um, get as much as you can into your experience. The way that I treated it was that I have a mind that gets bored very easily. I am a reflection often of my students, and so what helps me is creating new jobs, roles, and responsibilities, and learning more about a system and a structure. Because if the system is good, then it'll have good outcomes. It'll be designed and redesigned in favor of whatever it is made to produce. And so as a teacher, I started off with the opportunity to create new clubs, things that I was passionate about that I wanted to connect with young people over, and it worked. They were the school that I started at, the High School for Environmental Studies in Midtown West. They were down for that. Then they needed coaches. So I said, yeah, let me throw my hat in the ring. I'll be a coach. I coached 5 separate sports teams, all fabulous, great learning experiences. They needed people to take a lead teacher position, someone to step in and use a few years' experience to kind of mentor folks who are new to public schools. And then eventually there were opportunities for I realized there were opportunities for higher education for me. And that's actually what brought me to Brooklyn College in the first place. because I was looking for a competitive master's program that would allow me to get a school building license. Um, and Brooklyn College at the time offered a school building and school district license program. So I could be certified and licensed to not only be a principal or assistant principal, but eventually superintendent and onto other positions, depending on what my interests fell into. So for me, it was really all about how many choices can I create for myself and young people. And that's all through just creating a more holistic portfolio, which again stops me from being bored all the time.
Right. And do you think saying yes to all of those different opportunities, like coaching and all those opportunities that you just mentioned, do you think that kind of gave you a leg up in terms of being able to move into a principal role?
I think so. I mean, here's the thing. When you're a principal, regardless of what school you end up at, you need to know everything. And there's a lot of folks who will say, and this goes is often applied like, you can learn it as you go along. There are some jobs that have some flexibility and latitude like that. Being a principal is not really one of them. I'm grateful for my team here for sure, because I hit the ground running and they help push me along with that run. But I needed to understand public school athletic league. I needed to understand special events. I needed to understand budgeting and purchasing and human resources in order to make sure that when I took over a school and I lead it with my community, that there's a sense of structure that undergirds all the chaos that comes from working with young people in a system that's often in flux. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay, great. Thank you so much. The second question, what is an example of a project that you frequently work on?
So I'm always recentered on that population that I'm licensed to serve that I first started working with, and students with IEPs, and students with disabilities. Um, what I'm always looking at is addressing any kind of inequity, and specifically, I caution the term achievement gap, right? Because we know that's fallen out of favor for education. But I take a look at disparities between different groups, subgroups of students in my school, and I want to make sure that we're successful all the way through. So at my high school, even though we have an extensive portfolio entrance process, um, we serve 24% students with IEPs, and we're one of the hardest schools to get into in all of New York. Now, that's all by design. The reason why that matters is because artists see the world differently. I grew up an artist. I went to an art school, but also I understand that visual artists are deeply emotional humans, that they process and transfer information in different ways. And when you have learning differences on top of your own artistic expression, it can create pretty significant challenges for folks. So to bring it back to your question, a project that I'm always working on is making sure that students feel seen and affirmed in my learning environment, no matter who they are and what their background is, but they feel supported. And in order to feel supported, folks have to know how you learn. They have to know your story. I think students have to know the teacher's story too, so that there's a relationship that's formed that, again, while professional, allows for a flow of information more easily than if there's that standoffish educational background.
Right.
Yeah. And so I'll work on data projects. And this is like the less, exciting part of it, but I'll work on
Uh-huh.
data projects all the time. I want to make sure that my teachers are armed with all the information they need to make adjustments in their instruction. For that reason, I'm not only looking at data, but I'm in classrooms every single day without fail, because I think that that's the place where the magic happens. And I want to make sure that it's like I'm always doing quality review, right? Or quality checks, that students are happy, that they're engaged, that there aren't little things popping up here and there. And anecdotal data tied in with the larger sort of that's it's called street data, tied in
Mm,
tied in with like this broad data that's used to evaluate school success, gives me a clearer picture of how I can refine school process, curriculum, create new programs. All of it comes from seeing how students are succeeding, or being challenged, boots on the ground. And so that's like a daily project for me, but it's an important one because without it, you become a principal stuck in your office. And
right.
it's so easy to be stuck there for an entire year and be like, huh, what happened at the time, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Okay. Um, what do you enjoy most about your job?
So It's not just the summative things like a high school graduation, right? Those moments feel cathartic and incredible, especially if it was like a really tough year. So
Mm,
to give you a tiny bit of background, I've been in this for 4.5 years. I started in fall of 2019, so I'm a pandemic principal, someone who began the work with a year that seemed very exciting and full of promise and normal, and then obviously, like everyone, had to hard pivot. My heart goes
right.
back to students who learned during that time, entered school during that time, but then also had to graduate and find, normalcy among things that were traditionally very much in person. So when we did graduation that year, it felt uniquely cathartic, just to have survived that year and experienced so much with the community. But the things that make me happiest and give me the most joy are when I have students come into my office, and I do maintain, for the most part, an open door policy, and they'll run in and they'll say, Mr. Ray, I have an idea for this thing and I need you to hear it. And usually it's like a collaboration with, either an art house, a corporation for media design, because we have an in-house ad agency at the school and they do incredible international clientele work. Or
Oh, wow.
they'll say, I have an idea for a book we have to read. I've been reading this. I think you should read it too. I want you to check it out and let me know what you think. Um, it, it's it's the genesis of new ideas, right, and innovation. Because my biggest concern, being a principal and seeing how things are kind of like operating right now in terms of broad bureaucracy, is that we have to be the people who are doing the imagining. No one's going to do that work for us. And there sure isn't some cavalry of innovation that's going to come through and say, here's the next big thing, roll with it, right?
Hmm.
You get to experiment with our new big idea. The system works too slowly. So we're an innovation hub as a school. And that's a virtue that I espouse in every person that I meet. The other thing that gives me a lot of joy is making sure that I have opportunities for young people. So it's like, look, you can teach them all day long, but there's a humanity to it. People have to eat, they have to have work, they have to be self-sufficient. So if I can create any paid opportunities for students at my school, then that's instrumental to my and their joy simultaneously. And I'm not going to get in the whole like, pro capital markets guy attitude. There's a reality that half the kids in my school are Title I students who are at or below the poverty line, and they need to have opportunities for success as much, if not more, right, than many of their grade level
Right.
peers who are doing just fine. So we built out a really intense work-based learning program at the school, which connects to different industry partners outside and basically gets everyone paid. The beauty of a program like that is that your working experience can be housed in the school, help monitored by the school, and we can work on those kind of like self-regulation, executive functioning techniques that a lot of young people lack right now. And we do that in a conscientious way with organizations that mirror our values. So I get joy when I see kids come to me and they say, I got paid, and now I'm looking forward to my next opportunity because I've built a resume that I'm really proud of, and here's my portfolio to boot. So it's like, yeah, let's do that. More of that, please.
You're speaking our language.
Love it.
Oh, that's incredible. Um, okay, so describe the type of person that you think is a good fit to be, a teacher in education, a principal. Um,
So there are different stages of this. I've learned over
right,
time that one cannot be all. So let's start with the kind of person that a teacher should be. In my opinion, a teacher is someone who loves learning.
right.
And I want to be careful with how I approach that, right? Because to love learning does not mean to love it for the sake of itself. It's to love learning so that you can see and find these opportunities for growth for yourself, for other people. It creates kind of like how can I say this? Like a network of growth for everyone. If you go in as a teacher and your love of learning is something that has like the engine behind it is really about helping people become independent and helping people break apart long-standing systems that are unequal and unjust and unfair. Um, and allowing them and giving them the agency to define those things for themselves too, and not just being told what's what, but actively seeking truth. So that's a lofty ambition for a teacher, right? To teach truth. But I think if you take that kind of approach as a teacher, you'll do remarkably well in any subject area. Everything has adjacency to truth. The sciences are constantly seeking what the correct solution is to the hypothesis. English classes are defining how language applies, right, to something like expression and our inner world. Mathematics seeks proofs and concrete results for things that are probably the only solid structure in a world that is so chaotic. And then you've got the arts, right? Undergirding so much and seeking truth and beauty and defining beauty and meaning and identity for yourself are things that you can push and question and give people technical skills to work with. So truth as a North Star for teachers is something to work with. And if you feel like you have a strong a gut feeling to move people towards that, then you'll do incredibly well. The only other thing I'll add for teachers is to never be satisfied. And I know that's like not a healthy attitude to take for work, broadly speaking, right? I'm not saying be perfect, but I am saying be always be a little uncomfortable with the idea that you got everything just right, because there's always going to be lessons where you nailed it and you're going to you'll feel bit good, better, right? But there has to be that inner dissatisfaction of wanting to make sure that everyone got it, that you know they got it, that they know they got it, right? And there's this like constant turning over and self-assessment of how do I improve? Um, the kind of person that should be an assistant principal is someone who's ready for punishment. And I mean that holistically. Like you're just always going to be managing from the middle. You're going to be seeing a lot of problems. You have to be super flexible to situations that come up. I got to create an assistant principal job for myself, which is how I developed a computer science program and a video arts program at my old school. Those things were really helpful for me. It gave me a lot of latitude. Not everyone has that. And the jump above that is not just about salary, because there's a lot of different jobs you could work that will ask less of you in hours and emotional energy and availability than being a school administrator. But if you want to see a school function better and you want to have the opportunity to model for folks instruction, not fashion, um, the opportunity to get in classrooms and to work alongside people so that they feel reassured and supported that they're teaching the right way, and that students see that there's an administrator that's comfortable with not just walking in with a clipboard or a computer and being like, what are you learning? But no, like talking to them as human beings, it creates community. So being an agent of the community is really important there. And the kind of person who wants to be a principal is someone who has to be comfortable with isolation. I have an incredible network of fellow principals. I'm very lucky. I have a supportive superintendent, multiple, but it's lonely at the top. It's not the kind of job where you can really operate unless you have a lot of intrinsic motivation to improve a system and do better. And a lot of folks will say, "Oh, it's like the last stop on the train, right? That's the last before you retire." But let me tell you, I'm too young to retire. I got in this gig early, so I have to make this work in a way that I'm not thinking about what's the end result for me, but what's the next best thing I can do for every young person and their families in this building and beyond. And so the kind of person that should be a principal is someone who is willing to give up a lot of themselves, sometimes to a fault, but that's the only way that you're going to enhance education in a world that often doesn't treat it as anything special. I know it was like a lot, but
No worries. Andrea actually got bumped off, but I'll ask you a few more questions in the meantime.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So how can students make themselves competitive candidates for your field?
Great question. One of the things that you're going to need is in your student teaching work, make sure that you're working specifically with subgroups of students, right? As much as possible, asking for opportunity to take a lead, in the classroom when you have a co-teacher or a lead teacher that you're working with. Get aggressive about planning. Use and in doing so, understanding standards is incredibly important. I didn't understand that until like later after the fact because it wasn't a priority for the teaching fellows. But I'm saying it now that understanding like what direction you want students to go to based on skill standards is incredibly important. You have to have an end goal for kids in order for you to meaningfully construct even a single lesson. Um, don't do all the heavy lifting yourself. I use artificial intelligence systems all the time to do writing. And there's a 90-10 rule where you can let automation do a lot of the work, but you have to be the quality control person and personalize what comes out on the other side. I know a lot of people, especially new teachers, that are like, isn't AI cheating? I literally coach brand new teachers in my school as part of my twice monthly responsibilities for late night supervision. And they say the exact thing. They're like, well, why would we use AI? The students shouldn't be using it. And my pushback is the students should be using it responsibly. And we have to create policies that allow them to govern as opposed to be consumers of AI, because they are going to misuse it if they don't have good policies and practices in place that teachers are aware of, that students are aware of, and that we as administrators can get behind and on board. So teachers have to be flexible, use technology, experiment, and list out those types of technologies with which you're proficient in your resume, and have a kind of portfolio of activities that you've created using a range of different technologies that are based on skill standards. Quick note, less is more when it comes to planning for a single lesson. I know this runs counter to what a lot of folks hear. You're going to go to schools and see lesson plans. I'm not going to hold up any in front of my screen, but you're going to see them that are like 10 pages long. And you're like, what did you do? Like, why did you make a 10-page lesson plan? You can be succinct and direct. And that's the kind of concise that you're going to need to make sure that you can knock out proper instruction in 45 minutes. Um, Take your lessons, build them around a single skill, maybe two if you're feeling bold, a couple different pieces of content, right? Because you're a subject area teacher, and let that be the entire lesson. Do not throw everything at the wall and hope it sticks. Nothing will stick. So be intentional. Huge point of emphasis when it comes to giving an example or a sample lesson to a school that you're interested in teaching at.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
So what do you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
Last time I did one of these things, it was like work-life balance, but I've already forgotten what that means. So let's forget that I even said that in the first place. I think my priorities, what I know now, is that my time and energy are incredibly valuable to me and the people that I love. And I don't want to spend so much of myself in one place that I can't decompress even, right? When I go home, I need to be me. I need to be a regular human being with my likes, my interests, things that are going to inspire me that maybe I can bring back to work, but if not, that's okay too. What I've learned is that outside of the divide between professional life and personal life, that there's the lifelong learning piece um, stuck with me a bit more than I thought it would. And so I'm still always inspired to go out and try to figure out what's the next big thing um, for me and my school. And here's what this is leading to. I have tons of connections that I came in with and that I've gained over the years. And I needed to have used them faster, if that makes any sense. Like your connections, your professional connections, people you can leverage. Are you going to go to the grave with those things? Are they going to keep you warm at night? No, you have to use them for the benefit of young people. And it's a message that I cultivated after a few years of realizing that we have to be more urgent about a collective education with all New Yorkers and beyond, is that if you have a connection that's going to help kids at your school, contact them and leverage them. And if you're a principal, especially, right, because you're in a position of power to do so. But if you're a teacher, if you're an assistant principal, figure out creative new ways to help young people and use your equity and use your clout and use whatever it is that you can leverage, even if you're just cold calling folks, okay, to find something new. Because I learned through cold calling that incredible things happen, and it's worth taking the risk of forming of getting rejected in favor of creating a new connection that can benefit education as a whole and your school community. So don't wait on that. I waited a couple of years and that was too long.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have just a few more minutes before we start with the next presenter. So I'm going to ask you one more quick question, if I can find it. Um, what is one action step students should take in the immediate to get a head start on their career path?
Mm. An action step that students should take is doing research on schools that align to your values. If you end up at a school where there's a working culture, where the mission of the school are not consistent with the kind of person that you are, you will not be invested in that community. There is a teacher shortage for many a reason, but one of the benefits for the incoming class of educators is that schools are in need. And so schools that align to your values, the things that you want for young people, are very likely hiring. New York City is a city full of theme schools. Many of them, unfortunately, are theme in name only. But at a place like art and design, that's not the case at all, right? It is one of the most creative communities on earth. So if that's something you're into, look for the school that does that. If you're into law and justice, worry not. There's many a justice focused, secondary, middle or elementary school that you can join. And really, people are going to ask you when they hire you, what's your why? Like, why are you doing this? If you don't have a concise why as to why you're a teacher, you're dead in the water. Everyone wants to know your why. It's part of your tenure portfolio. It's part of those early introduction activities where the staff gets to know each other, right? All those things set a tone. Your why should be a strong conviction. And you need to do a gut check because if you don't have a strong conviction about this work, I don't know, there's plenty of other jobs. And, are you in for it for yourself or are you in for it for the people that you're helping out? We're not flipping burgers. Back due to burger flippers. We are working on the future of this world. So there is a great deal of responsibility and you have to want to take it seriously.
Thank you.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mary, were you gonna?
No, it's fine. You can take over.
Okay, okay. I'm so sorry, Max. I was having
All good.
my internet was all wonky and I just joined back. So I missed a bit of your answer, but I'm back.
All good.
Um
I think I used my time. I want to
you
make sure.
did use your time, yes, and you brought up so many insightful points. So thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And you can stay on or you can go, whatever you'd like to do.
I really appreciate that. One thing about principals is that the work is never done, and now I have another meeting to hop into. But I just want to say thank you and best of luck to everyone on this call and your entire cohort for finding the next thing. If you want, I'll leave my email. Well, my LinkedIn is in the chat, I think.
Yes,
Yeah,
I,
feel free to reach out. I
that's wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much, Max. Have a good night.
you too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay. Christina, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for being here.
Of
Uh,
course.
we are going to jump right in. You know all the questions that we're going to ask you. So, the first one, what factors inspired you to select your career, what you're doing right now? So, why don't you just give like a little bit of an intro as well as to what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I'm a school counselor. I have my master's in school counseling. I'm not a teacher. I don't have a license to teach. I am a 3K to 8 counselor. My license covers K to 12, but I have 3K and pre-K in my school. I am in my 7th year now. So that's a little bit. I work where I live. I work in Rockaway in Queens, in a pretty tough neighborhood in Arverne. That's like the backstory.
Okay, okay. And then what really just kind of inspired you
Mhm.
to become a guidance counselor?
Mhm. So my dad was a school teacher for 32 years, and part of 10 years of that time, he was a dean. So as a young girl, I used to always go to his school and basically like grew up watching him with the children. He didn't really want me to be in the classroom at that point. He also was on his way out too. He retired in 2012. So I used to visit him and I would see how he would interact with the children. And I just loved like the restorative approach that he took. He never would yell at them at all. And he took a more like a guidance approach. And I would also like love to see like the sense of like community and like partnerships that the teachers had with the children. It was like a wonderful place to be. So because he didn't really want me in the classroom at that point, he suggested guidance, and here I am now.
Okay, great. Great. And what is an example of perhaps a project that you frequently work on?
Mhm. So I feel like under the scope of counseling, I wouldn't say that I work on projects per se. I would say that
Right.
there are like activities that happen yearly. So such as like high school and middle school applications, any of like the theme weeks like Red Ribbon Week, Respect for All Week, um, perhaps like FBAs and BIPs, like functional behavioral assessment, behavior intervention plans, IEPs, so individualized education plans, IPRs, individual progress reviews. So just like a little, I know I said like a lot of words, but for example, like the IPRs are meetings that have to be had. It's a state mandate. It's for grades 6 through 12. In my case, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students must meet with a certified school counselor at least once a year and discuss college and career, social emotional growth or concerns, academic progress, and that's once a year. So that has to be done. That would be considered like an yearly activity. Like the theme weeks, I'd say, for example, like Respect for All Week, that's coming up in February. So myself, along with like the other liaisons, will come up with theme that we want to have for the week and activities that the students and the staff will participate in. Not under the scope of guidance. I do some work for my principal, like on the side that I work like digitally in Canva. And I do stuff for her there, whether that's like I do the school calendar, event flyers. It's just something that I've always kind of enjoyed. Actually used to, when I worked in Magner, Andrew, you might
Yes,
remember, I used to do
I
bulletin boards
I do.
and some digital stuff. So it's just something that I've always enjoyed. And it's like carried over into this work that I do too.
Right. Right. Okay, excellent. Um, and what would you say you enjoy most about your work as a guidance counselor?
Okay, so I have a very heavy caseload of mandated students who I must see those children. And I've been seeing some of the same children for these 7 years. So this year, it's a little different than usual. I was asked to basically be in the auditorium for morning entry. They're doing things a little different this year, and K-5 children are in the auditorium. So I basically play this big role where like I run the auditorium in the mornings with announcements and the pledge and songs and stuff like that. So it gives me the opportunity to see a lot of other children that I normally would not work with. And then they would see me, and now they know who I am. I know who they are. K-5 is a big chunk of the school population. So,
Right.
it's nice. Like you see them in the morning, you greet them, like, they give you hugs, and it's something that I'm not used to. Over the 7 years, it's the first year I'm doing this. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I do also really love high school applications. I've always kind of like immersed myself in that process. I work like either individually with the children in 8th grade or in small groups, push into the classes, and we discuss like their interests and their needs. And then we try to find them high schools that they would like to apply for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, excellent. Um, Describe the type of person that you feel would be a good fit to be a guidance counselor.
Okay, I feel like it has to be somebody who is patient, empathetic, a good listener, a team player, and someone who could definitely take like feedback, well, because you're always going to have people like kind of like in your ear, I think, talking about this and that, and they have their opinion, and you might disagree with them, but maybe you can't react on it. You have to like keep your composure.
Mm-hmm.
Also someone who's like okay with kind of like going outside the realm of being like an on paper school counselor. Um, Sometimes counselors find that like they get involved in things that they might normally not be under the scope of being a counselor. As a school counselor, you wear many, many hats, and sometimes, depending on your administration, they don't understand the role of being a school counselor. So they might give you a bunch of different things to do and then expect you to do what they want, because you're the school counselor and you have to basically have an answer to everything. So it's important that you know how to give pushback respectfully, and just know your boundaries. That's very important because you could sometimes cross over and then you could get a little bit of burnout, and you don't want that so early on in your career at all. Like, there may be days where you have to be like the nurse, the dean, an administrator, you're running around the building, and it could get a little like much. And then
Mm-hmm.
admin might expect you to do it like all alone. So you might have to be like a parent advocate sometimes too. So um, might be a liaison for everything, like the child abuse liaison, the sexual harassment liaison, respect for all liaison, like the list can go on and on. And
Right.
then that's in addition to all the other responsibilities that you will have to complete.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you wear a lot of hats.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
Yeah. I think it's really important that you have time management, know how to plan things out, write things down, take good notes. Um, you're going to hear a lot CYA. So basically, look out for yourself, cover yourself, make sure that you know like your contract, know your rights, in case someone wants you to do something that maybe you're not comfortable with, or something that isn't under the scope of your work.
Mm-hmm.
And give that respectful pushback, when necessary. Also, I think when you're interviewing for a position, it would be important to ask the administrator or the administrators that would be interviewing you if there are other school counselors that are in the school as well, or if you be alone. Um, do you want to work with a team or do you not want to work with a team? I had no idea that I'd be the only school counselor there. It's a very large population, a high mental health need. That's another thing. See what your administrator's take is on mental health. We have a very tough neighborhood, crises all the time. I'm the only school counselor. And we just lost our mental health counselor from an outside agency. And there's no talk of replacing her. So is a large need for mental health. Know your admin's stance on mental health.
Mm-hmm. And how many students do you support?
So the school has about 620 students, maybe 650. It depends. I can't, it goes up and down by year. We're actually getting more and more children from other states too. In the recent weeks, they've been coming from Florida or other states. And they come very large families, 4 to 5 children per family. Some of them with IEP services, special education services, or
Mm-hmm.
E&L students as well. So the numbers do go up depending, and especially depending on the time of year. At this point, the numbers usually go up. They dwindle a little bit towards like in like the summer, and then they kind of bump back up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
I have 60 mandates, 60 mandated children that have to be seen that are on my caseload. There really is no number for New York. Um, the ratio that you might see would be like 1 to 250 students per counselor. But as far as mandates go, there really is no number. So you kind of have as many as like you're expected to have.
they give you, right.
Yeah, they give you. And then that's plus the entire rest of the school building, whatever
Mm-hmm.
might happen throughout the day that you might
Mm-hmm.
have to support them.
Right. Right. Okay, so I think we have a number of questions for you, Christina. So, Mary's going to ask you some of those questions now from that the students put in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Hey,
sure.
Christina. Okay, so the first question is how do you become a counselor? Is it hard?
Okay, so you can this was back in 2015 when I applied. Things might have changed now. I do think that some things have changed now as far as maybe possibly taking an exam to get into certain programs. I went to Brooklyn College for undergrad and Brooklyn College for grad. I am not a good test taker, so I refuse to apply for any program that required the GRE. I will write a 25-page paper. I will not take a test. I did an exit portfolio for the master's program, and I was great with that. No test. So you could have, at that point in 2015, you could have any undergraduate major degree, bachelor's degree to apply for the program. So I was a children's studies major. That was what my bachelor's was in. And then I applied for the master's program at Brooklyn College. Things might have changed now. They might have some more requirements, but if you were a business major, you could have applied for the master's program at that point. So is it hard? Not the program hard or the job itself hard?
They didn't
I
specify.
think it's like, is it difficult to kind of go through the process of becoming a counselor? That's my gut.
Oh, they wrote the job.
Oh, is the job hard? Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. So it really depends on the day. You're dealing with so many things throughout your day that you really never know what you're going to expect. Like you will have one of the professors back when I was in the master's program, she said that she had a list of all her, her daily schedule, and she'd go to work and she wouldn't get to any of it by the time the end of the day came. So I do have a schedule that I'm supposed to adhere to, but sometimes I can't adhere to it, whether it's crisis, ACS comes in. That could be a big chunk of your day too. If an ACS worker comes in, or if a call needs to be made to CPS, you drop what you're doing and you have to attend to them. Crisis can be hard if you can't de-escalate the student, if you are, you kind of learn on the job. It's a lot of hands-on experience. The things that I learned in my master's program, very little stuff I took to the job. I learned hands-on. I learned down on the floor with children, having to work with them to de-escalate them. So it depends on the day, but it's very rewarding. Like I love my kids. I love the children that I get to work with. I love the staff, and it's rewarding.
Great, excellent.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And just to piggyback off of that, you briefly mentioned, so what are some challenges that you have faced with children, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I feel like the biggest thing is ACS and CPS, like having to work with the workers and the people who come in and they want the information about the child. You drop everything, you have to go work with them, or just calling in a case itself. Or if a case was called from outside, and then you have to, get the child, listen to the story, see what's going on. Like you deal with, or you hear a lot of emotionally draining stories. Abuse cases, it can affect you mentally if you aren't able to like kind of break away from it. Like whatever happens at work, and I don't bring it home. Sometimes people struggle with that. That's why like it's really important that you know like what you need for self-care. They talk a lot about that in grad school, and you're kind of like, oh, whatever. But it really is a real thing. You really do need to make sure that you know whatever that self-care is that works for you. Make sure that you try to follow that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Something else that would be challenging, I'd say, is telling people no, or like, I can't get to it right now. Uh, I'm the type of person that wants to, if someone asks me for help, I'm going to try to get it done, especially if my name's attached to it. And then once you start doing things the right way and people see that you do a good job, you become like reliable. Then they kind of want you to do their job for them. So that's challenging. That's in any type of job. Doesn't have to just be school counseling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what advice would you give to an aspiring school counselor?
I think that if you're in a master's program, like if you apply for the master's program to be a school counselor, there's going to be days that it's going to be really, really tough. The classes are going to be uncomfortable. The discussions are uncomfortable, especially like the classes where it's like a fishbowl that like you're talking in a group and then there's a group that's like observing you. That's awkward. And then they comment on you. So there were definitely parts of the program where I didn't want to either. I wanted to stop. And my dad was like, just wait until you get to practicum, which is like your first like internship, like your shorter hours, and then use what you've learned or not and apply it to the work with the children, and see how you feel. So, and that's what I did. And that helped me to move forward and finish the program. Um, but you definitely have like those ups and downs. Was that your full question? Did I answer it?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, good.
Do you need a master's or just
Yes, yes. So you do need your master's to be a school counselor. but I'm only able to work, you're only able to work in a school. You can't work in a hospital. You cannot have your own like clinic or work as like a social worker. I am not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. Some people sometimes mix those things up together, therapy, counseling. The way I like to explain it to families is school counselor deals with school-related issues. Therapists can deal with outside issues. They overlap sometimes. Sometimes the kids do want to talk about home, but they're separate. So you need your master's for school counseling. You can't work anywhere else besides a school.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm just going to ask one more question and then
Mm-hmm.
we can move on to the next participant. To be competitive, is learning a second language important or anything else that helps increase your chances to get a job?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do not speak another language. There was a bilingual extension program attached to the master's program when I was in the master's. Um, I do think that it helps being able to speak another language, depending on also like the school and like the population, having having the ability to speak to families in schools. Like I'm not able to, so I would have to maybe get a translator. You could call like the DOE translation line. So I definitely think that it helps. I think that it does make you a little bit more competitive. They always say that there's like a hiring freeze. They always say that there's not enough counselors, like not enough money for counselors, but then there's not enough counselors. So, but we need the support, right? The kids need the mental health support. I did play therapy certificate back when I was in the program. It was like the extra class, fifth class was free. I don't think that that made me any more or less competitive at all. I haven't even been able to use it in my work. There's no way throughout the day to do play therapy with children at all. So was it educational, beneficial? Sure, but I haven't been able to use it. Maybe someone who's interested in having like more of like a mental health degree would be able to use that in their work with children. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. You're
I
welcome.
just have a really quick question, Christina. What was it like for you to apply to positions? Like what was that whole process like for you? And like when you finished your master's, you were
Yeah.
in the job search, what was that like?
Okay, so I wound up, my dad drove me around to like 75 schools, and I dropped my resume off to a bunch of schools in Brooklyn and Queens, all over. Out of all those 75 schools, I got one interview. That's it.
Wow.
And the interview that I got, my principal then hired me like the week later. I went with my portfolio, my big exit portfolio with everything in it from the program. And she was like, I want to look through this. She kept it. I left it there for a week. I went back the week later. I was like, I got to keep looking for jobs. I need my portfolio back. She's like, well, if you're interested, I'd like to hire you. So I was like, oh, that's wonderful. You're the only person, only interview that I got. It was just very, very challenging. So I was not able to like look on open market, which you guys might have heard of before, because I wasn't already a DOE employee. I didn't have a connect with someone who could look on what's it called? Open market. So I had to kind of just go around, drive around to schools and hand out my resume. I would hand it to like the custodian. I would hand it and put it in the office, like whoever was there, I would give it to.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Thank you. So you persevered and it was just that one opportunity, that one open door.
Yeah, and actually, it wasn't actually even listed on open market. The counselor wound up retiring. I think that there was like another person who was interviewed, and like I got the position. Yeah, and it was in Rockaway. It's great. It's 15 minutes from my house. I couldn't have asked for like a better location either. Good
That's
parking.
incredible.
Good parking. That's a big thing. Parking, commute, that's big, especially
Yes,
in the mornings.
that is big. Oh, Christina, it was so good to see you. Thank you so much for
You
being
too. Of
here with us tonight.
course. All right.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Jean-Christophe, thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I can't complain. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. So we are going to jump right in. And I know you know all the questions that we're going to ask you. So the first question is, what factors inspired you to select your career, what you're doing right now?
So I'm in education in general, but when right out of high school, I actually went to engineering school because my family told me I had to be a doctor, lawyer, and engineer. So those are my only options. And while in engineering school, my GPA dropped to a 1.7. Then I switched to architecture. My GPA dropped to a 1.3. And while I was in architecture, I needed to pay bills, and I ended up teaching art to high school students. And that literal light bulb clicked, and that's when I realized that education was for me. So from there, I went to become a teacher, elementary school, then a counselor in middle school, then a counselor in high school, and now an assistant principal at my school.
Excellent.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Okay. And what's an example of a project that you frequently work on?
So attendance is a big thing at our school in terms of kids who are not coming to school. So lately, something I've been doing is just going through the list of students with excessive absences and just speaking, calling the families, emailing them, trying to figure out what exactly is going on, and then connecting them with their counselors to be able to see how I can support them. Um, it's my school is pretty large. We have 6,000 students, so and each counselor has about 300 something in their caseload. So it's a lot of different ways. So and I have to say that I really love my team. They do a really good job with the way they support the kids. So I come in when it comes to having that extra support or that admin support, or to find better ways to connect my counselors to the teachers in our building.
Excellent. Okay. And what do you enjoy most about your work?
The kids. I gotta be honest here with you. 90% of my complaints are really about the adults. I think my friends have told me, you've been working with kids for over a decade now. Do you still want to be a dad? I was like, actually, I do still want to be a dad. It's not the kids that's the problem. It's a lot of times where we have kids that are getting a lot of mental health training, but then the families themselves do not get it. So you have this different narratives between home and school. So while we're supporting our kids as much as possible, when they get home, they get completely different messages. So like today, for example, I had a student, she was crying in my office because she tried to speak to her father about not being accepted to a school, and her father just told her to man up. And I tried to explain to her that you have to understand, I'm not saying that your dad is right, but you have to understand that a lot of the opportunities that you have in terms of being able to express yourself, the options that you have, that's not something that he had. So it's ingrained in him the way he's raised, and he wants you to be successful. It's just the way he's demonstrating it may not exactly be beneficial to your mental health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And describe the type of person that you think would be a good fit for education, for teaching, for being an assistant principal, eventually a principal.
Someone who is patient and flexible. I will definitely say there are times where I feel like I'm hitting a roadblock with a lot of families, and it feels like it's times where I just want to scream in my head, but obviously I can't do that. So it's a lot of it's and I say patience because there are like one family I'm working with, it took us 3 years to finally get to a point now where mom finally apologized to her son for a lot of the damage that she's caused. And this is like several meetings, several emails, several phone calls, and it's just repetitive, where it feels like sometimes I'm hitting the roadblock and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to keep doing this? But I think the fact that the kid does want to get better, and sometimes even if they don't want to, they don't know how to. I think having that patience and flexibility for both the kid and the family, and being able to understand sometimes when you need to step back to see what type of education is lacking, that you may have received in understanding our own privilege in that sense. And I think that's what can make us a valuable educator to both our families and our kids.
Did you always know that you wanted to be an educator?
No, definitely not. It was, I actually remember the night when my college applications were due, my mother just came in and a lot of the schools already picked for me. And it was just like this narrative. I'm from Haiti. So a lot
Engineering,
of the narrative
right?
was just about even with my brothers, like one of my brothers actually is an engineer, so he made the cut. But my youngest brother went to law school, and then about 2 years in, he was like, "Nope, I'm done." And then I went into engineering, and I was like, "Nope, I'm done." So it's safe to say that my mother was very disappointed in us. But when I started teaching the high school kids, it was truly something that I look forward to every day. And mind you, I was doing this on Saturdays. So my actual degree I was studying for was Monday to Friday, where I was just, sometimes sleeping under the desk and, doing projects where I'm seeing the sunrise and the sunset. And, but something I look forward to all the time was teaching the kids and then going on trips with them. And then the more I did it, the more I realized, yeah, this is definitely for me. And I didn't find that out until 5 years after high school.
Right. So for all the students listening in, you really have to, if you love the work, if you love working with the students and the kids, then you're on the right path. I mean, it's clearly something that you have to love, or it's not going to be sustainable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And then finally, what do you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
What do I know now? Well, I will say this. There was a moment in high school where my mother actually said, because I was accepted in Macaulay Honors Program, but I also got accepted to Cooper Union, so it was two good schools that gave me full scholarships. But I do remember a moment when she said maybe you should go to City College in case there's something else you might be interested in. But because of the messaging I've been receiving since I was a child, I thought it was a trap she was setting up for me, and
Ah,
then just went straight into engineering school. But it's something that if I could tell my younger self, I probably would have told my younger self, go to City College. Probably my career probably would have started earlier.
interesting. Okay. Okay, great. Such an interesting story. Um, so Mary has a number of questions from the students in the chat, and she's gonna ask you those questions now.
Okay, thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I want to ask a question before I get into the students' questions.
Okay.
How do you maintain an effective work-life balance?
I do my best to answer as many of the emails I can at school. I know a lot of the counselors have told me, don't put the Outlook app on your phone, and a lot of them don't, because it's the best way to maintain that balance because they know that. And I know how I am also. There's times where I want to take the Outlook app, but then I'm just thinking, oh, but wait, but then there's this kid, but then there's that kid, but then so I try my best to tell myself, okay, you've dedicated about an hour now at home for this, shut it off, go do something else, go I've got, as you can tell, I'm a big nerd. I've got the Star Wars thing behind me. So I just, try to watch my shows. I love to travel. So it's something that I do my best to remind myself on a daily basis. And I even tell my students also, I tell them from 5 p.m. on a Friday to 5 p.m. on a Sunday, I'm not answering any emails. So you can send me an email still. Obviously, if it's an emergency, I will reply to you, but from 5 p.m. Friday to 5 p.m. on Sunday. So and I answer emails on Sundays from 5 to 8 just to get the next morning ready. But that time for myself on the weekends, I definitely do. And then I give myself about an hour after I come home from work. And after that, I just, have dinner, watch my shows, and then make sure I get that good amount of sleep also.
That's great.
Thank
I
you.
feel like everyone needs a good work-life balance, so that's really great.
Yes.
So, does being a principal need a lot of teaching experience?
I do think so. So my school, to give you an idea, my school is massive. We have um about 6,000 students. We have 17
Wow.
assistant principals and a one principal. Our principal is a former teacher from in the building also. And I will say what's helped a lot from being a teacher to going to being a counselor to now assistant principal. I've been able to see a lot of school aspects from a pedagogical point of view, but also from a mental health point of view. So when it comes to coming up with policies, like one of the policies that I came up with at our school was for hospitalized students, because I work in a technical school, a lot of teachers tend to follow the rules to the book. So when I tried to get them to be more flexible about kids who come from the hospital, for example, or have had a mental health crisis, and then bombarding them with zeros for missing assignments, I tried to explain to them, well, now we need a formal policy to help them understand that maybe, slow down on this and help and kind of understand what this child has gone through. And that way, when I have a conversation with them, when they say, about, this one happens in the classroom, and I just tell them, well, when I was in the classroom, this is what I tried. And this is something that's helped in terms of connecting with them.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
What kind of hand-on experience do new ESL elementary teachers need to be easily hired?
So my first year teaching, they actually told me that they were giving me a E&L class, and I was terrified because I just thought, oh wow, okay. And I speak French and Haitian Creole, and I'm conversant in Spanish. But when they told me that the population I was going to be working with was Bengali, Puerto Rican, Dominican, I just thought, okay, so this is something I'm going to have to learn. So in terms of hands-on experience, I guess it would have to be more understanding how to differentiate instruction. And I say this in the way that, for example, one thing I will say with my ENL and ESL students, the ELA was where they struggled the most, but the math they were very strong in. Social studies was kind of in between. So when I kept doing a lot of the assessments, I had to speak to my principal and tell her that um, I'm not reaching them. I don't know what to do. I have to do a different form of assessment. I understand what we have to give to the state, but unless I do something else, then they're going to fail. So one of the projects that I did with the class actually was we were studying kind of colonialism, exploration, so in 1492. So I decided to turn my classroom into a courtroom, and I put Christopher Columbus on trial. And one of my students who was failing multiple assessments, he actually volunteered to be Christopher Columbus, and he aced it. And it was became clear to me that day that he fully understand everything that we were doing since September for months. It was just the way he was assessed that it wasn't done well. So I would say a lot of when it comes to the hands-on experience, don't be so much about the paper and pencil, but maybe try to do a lot of project-based assessments to be able to reach the kids in different ways, in a way to essentially reach a different type of intelligence. Like it was a theorist in the 80s, in 1983, I believe it was Howard Gardner, and he introduced the theory of multiple intelligences, and that's something that I've always hold dear as a foundation for my pedagogy, and the way that you may have a kid that has intelligence in math but not so much in social studies. You may have one that's one in music but not so much in the arts. So how can you use the multiple intelligences that they're proficient in to help them kind of supplement where they are lacking?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you also mentioned about speaking other languages. So how has that helped you in your career now?
It's helped me a lot in terms where a lot of the foundations of these languages are very similar. So I think there was a colleague of mine actually. We would be sometimes just for fun. I would speak French to him, and he'd speak Italian to me, and somehow we fully understood each other because we realized the foundations were the same. So in the classroom, it was a way for me to connect with the kids also. So a lot of the kids from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, because I live in a neighborhood similar, I would make a lot of the jokes with them in the classroom. So we connected a lot that way, so they knew that I was strict, but then when it came to being caring, I could also do that. And that was just a way for me to reach their love language to help them understand that I am on their side.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna try to squeeze in one or two more questions before the next speaker. Um, how can students make themselves competitive candidates for your field?
Definitely, I would say it's you definitely want to show, what else you want to look at the whole picture. So it's something that I say, like, for example, the interviews that I did this year for the counselors that I hired. I hired two counselors this year, and what I was looking for was not just counselors that were versed in um how to read a transcript, or how to read a transcript, how to understand how high school worked, but I wanted to see what else they've done outside of that. Like, one candidate, pretty much her resume was the same thing I did. It was from after school program to teacher to counselor, and then to that now where she is now. So it's I look for the variety, because a lot of the kids at our school, we want they connect more with educators that go beyond just what their contract says. So if I see that there's a lot of other projects you've been on the side, like your resume is telling me that there are other things that you wouldn't think relate to education but actually are, then that just tells me the type of flexibility that a candidate may have, but also how they may connect with the students a lot more.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm gonna ask one more. What are some tips for success in your field?
Take care of yourself. I'm gonna just say, take care of yourself. Um, know when to say no. I think that's something that I've heard before, on this Zoom already. It's definitely, I think the self care aspect is definitely the main one, because I think way too many times we think that it's selfish to take care of ourselves. But I like to use the analogy of a flight. When a host tells you to put your own mask on first, and then you put on the kids' mask, I think it just helps you understand that, yes, you do want to be alive to be able to take care of them. So you can worry about your students as much as possible, but if you're not your best, then you're not actually going to be helpful to them. And you definitely want to be able to take care of yourself first.
100%. I definitely agree with that. So that is all our questions that we have for you. Is there any way that you would rather students contact you? I did put your LinkedIn in the chat. I don't know if that works.
Yep, that's perfect. The app is on my phone, so I can definitely answer questions.
Perfect. And thank you so much for coming tonight. If you want to stay on, you can definitely stay on, but if you need to head out, that's fine too.
All right, I do need to head out. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, and good luck, everyone.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, you're most welcome. Have a good night.
You too.
All right.
So our next presenter will be Evelyn. Hi, Evelyn. How are you?
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Andrea got disconnected, so I'm gonna just start off with some questions and we could go from there. Okay. So, what factors inspired you to select your current career?
So, two main factors were one, my love and passion for learning, and two, just learning about the LIFE program, which is a gem in District 79. Let me just tell you briefly about the program. LIFE provides free, high-quality early childhood education to the children of New York City Department of Education's student parents. Those student parents are anywhere from middle school children, high school, and high school students that transition into college, or any District 79 programs, co-op tech, and adult ed, to name a few. And also community parents who are interested in enrolling their children in our 3K classrooms. We have 32 classrooms across the 5 boroughs, and our children range from ages 6 weeks to up to 4 years old. So a fun fact is that Life serviced 562 families in the 2022-2023 school year alone. This impacted over 1,000 youth, including infants, toddlers, and their student parents. When I began my career in education, I knew for a fact that early childhood education was the population I wanted to serve. While in the classroom, I learned how critical it is to nourish and to support the development of a child's neurological and social emotional development and its holistic impact. A baby's brain develops about 1 million new neural connections every second. So that means that in the early years of life, their brains are being molded and shaped, and that made me understand that I had a great responsibility. But now, outside the classroom, but within the program, I'm an assistant principal, and I'm able to support the families at a macro level. I work with a great team of administrators who really laser focus on providing our student parents with individualized learning experiences that go beyond schooling.
Thank you. What is an example of a project you frequently work on?
A project I frequently work on is facilitating professional learning for our school community, particularly in the areas of emotional intelligence and building trusting relationships. I'm a believer that furthering our development in kindness and making that our default is very important. And I know that emotional intelligence might seem like a buzzword for some, but the more and more I emerge in the leadership role, the more I see the need for it. Just an example, last weekend I was in Houston, and now my nephew fell. He was running, scraped his knees, and there was a woman who seemed that her residence were the streets of downtown Houston, and she was worried for him. And she crossed her arms, she was a few feet away, and she said, I can't see children and dogs suffer. And I tell you, I cried. And my child is like, Mom, why are you crying? And just had to tell her that this is someone's child, this woman living in the streets. She cares for us that she doesn't know. But in the same way, I want to support and develop empathy in our program so that every time we approach a situation in our classrooms, we can think to ourselves, this is someone's child. It's not just a name on a roster or an OSIS number. It's not just a name in a Salesforce dashboard, but these are children and they need our attention and our empathy just as much. So this is something I try to build, and also just really for our school community, just building those relationships, because our classrooms are formed by teachers, educational paraprofessionals, and social workers. And they're working day to day for long hours trying supporting our families. So I know that this is important for us because we want the relationships within the teams in our classrooms to be strong, to be trusting, because in this way we model to our students what trusting relationships look like.
100%. What do you enjoy the most about your career, and what is the most challenging?
What I enjoy the most is really facilitating a smooth work day in our classrooms each day. I support 10 classrooms throughout Brooklyn and Queens because our classrooms are hubbed in high schools mainly. So I really try to focus on making sure that our classrooms, our staff have everything they need so that the day can run smoothly. So that may look like supporting them with coverage if there's staff that are absent on a given day, or addressing concerns or questions that teachers, educational parents, or social workers may have. That also looks like providing, ensuring that our classrooms are safe, that our staff is safe, that our children are safe. And also, our classrooms are unique because our students are infants and toddlers. So there are certain supplies that our classrooms need to function effectively, and that I also want to make sure that they have the gloves, the bleach for sanitizing and cleaning toys and classroom materials, just diapers, changing paper for the for when teachers or educational paraprofessionals need to change diapers, but really just making sure that they have everything they need. And most of all, I enjoy encouraging those at the forefront of our program, which are the teachers, the social workers, and the educational paraprofessionals, just to become leaders in their own capacity and ensuring that there's clear communication among the team and that they respect one another, so that our students could reap the benefits of a cohesive, consistent, safe, and academically rich learning environment.
Thank you. And can you describe the type of person that would be a good fit for your career?
That's a really good question. I think about that often. I think about myself and what makes it a good fit for me and for someone that would be interested in this career. I think mostly you need to be flexible. Um, we are a program that is distributed throughout the 5 boroughs. So a lot of my colleagues I don't get to see a lot quite often. So we have schedules that are created weekly and meetings that we have on a daily basis. And sometimes those meetings are in person, sometimes they're virtual, but always consistent. And I think that that's what makes our program so strong, that we're in constant communication, but the days will never look the same. Sometimes I visit 3 schools in a day. Sometimes I'm scheduled to visit 4, but then there's a situation in a classroom. So I have to stay there a little longer. So my days never look the same, and being flexible is very important. Also, you have to have the willingness to travel. We are itinerant assistant principals, and our classrooms are located in various boroughs. So there is the need to travel across town, across the borough, from Brooklyn to the Bronx, to Staten Island, Queens, Manhattan. And that's something that is definitely key for this role. Also, being open to learn. Even though we're in the DOE, we operate quite differently. We're a unique niche. So the way our systems and processes are developed, they're really catered to the needs of our students. We are a District 79 program, so our students range from 13 years old to adulthood. So this makes our process quite different from any other schools. I know that we have a solid framework, but at times we need to understand that our students' educational plans are not a one size fits all, because they're catered to the unique needs and strengths and supports that our students need. And lastly, I think to be innovative, because our learning community at the Life program is very open to new ideas, to fresh ideas also that can support students' attendance, enrollment, retention, and family engagement. So we also always invite our colleagues to bring ideas. I know a lot of my colleagues plan family engagements on the weekends, or incentives to encourage achieving SMART goals that social workers work with students to form and to plan. So we definitely love that about our team, and really think that that's a highlight, that we are open to all fresh ideas to really improve, support our program.
Thank you. And my final question for you is, what do you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
What I know now that I wish I knew earlier is, well, there's so many things, right? But really the fact that being a leader is not about telling people what to do. For me, what I've learned is, and it's something that I'm working on every day and consistently, is becoming an effective coach. Coaching effectively, I think, is the key to being a strong leader. Just being an active listener and really asking the right questions. Because at the end of the day, our role is to develop others' autonomy and leadership skills so that they too can make the decisions and we can work collaboratively to continue to go forward with our mission and our vision.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open it up for some Q&A questions from the students. But before I start with their questions, I do have a question. How do you stay motivated and productive?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the motivation is, for me, truly that I'm just passionate about working with children of all ages, and just seeing them grow and seeing them graduate from high school, achieve academic success, go to college. We have some college graduates, all those things. We have a mentoring program where we see our students mentoring our new students. So all of that really motivates me, inspires me, and yeah.
Thank you so much. This question is actually from Natalia. She says, thank you for attending our event. What can a student do to be more competitive, such as speak another language, experience working with special ed, etc.?
Can you ask that one more time?
What can a student do to be more competitive, such as speak another language or experience working in special ed?
I think both are great attributes. I think, especially now, our communities are shifting, and we have a lot of new students from different countries coming in. And really, if you know another language or you can learn another language, that's always something that helps you connect at a deeper level with other students. And also, special education is the degree I obtained at Brooklyn College, and with alongside early childhood education. I think it broadens my scope and the way I approach every situation with students. And it also gives me the understanding of other resources that are available if children need the evaluations or they need referrals, and really understanding children as a whole. Those are important, but not having those qualities still makes you a great candidate for this career.
Evelyn, I'm just wondering what you find to be most challenging about your work.
What I find to be most challenging is just, I work with a lot of staff, and really understanding each person, hearing them out, and just really meeting them where they are, and really just trying to get to a common ground. I think that when you're in a leadership role, you meet people that have a lot of experience. You have people that are new at the role. You have people that are eager to learn, and others that are resistant, you know. So all of that, it is a challenge, but I embrace the challenge, and I'm open to learn each and every day from everyone.
Thank you.
We have one more question in the chat. Any advice for new elementary school teachers?
Um, I would say find a mentor, someone that has experience, someone that wants to share the knowledge, because textbook knowledge is very different from life experience knowledge. And it's important to have someone to turn to ask questions, to share your insecurities, to get that validation and that confirmation that what you're doing is working, and really understand how you can stretch yourself to improve and to learn more.
Thank you so much. So our next speaker will be Jada Young. I want to thank you so much, Evelyn, for being here today. Would the best way to reach you be via LinkedIn, or is there anything else that you rather?
Sure, LinkedIn works perfectly fine.
Okay,
Could always reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. And
perfect.
for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Evelyn.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, Andrea.
Okay, so we're going to be moving along. Hello, Jada.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We are just going to jump right in. You are last but not least. Um, so what factors inspired you to select your job?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about an easy way to say this without going through the long sort of like odyssey that it took me to get here. Um, so the shortish version of this is that I started my career after my first round in grad school working in community-based nonprofits. I did that for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years or so, and then ended up applying to Brooklyn College to the school counseling master's program. And really, the impetus behind that was working in like the nonprofit space. A lot of it is like grant funding that runs out, and then once the funding runs out, you kind of feel like you don't have a job any longer. So instead of
Mhm.
like continuously chasing opportunities and chasing jobs with more stability, it seemed like a perfect time to applied to go back to school because I also wanted to be a counselor. And I loved working directly with students and with young people. So I ended up applying to Brooklyn College. I got in, and then I did the master's program for 3 years. I was a part-time student. Then I graduated, became a counselor, and then did another pivot. So now I'm working back in the nonprofit space. But the great thing about it is that I am using my counseling skills and my degree because I'm also supporting counselors in different programs across the country. So it's a sort of a circuitous way to get back to where I started in a weird way, but in a more informed and prepared way since I have this training from Brooklyn College.
Okay, excellent. And what is an example of a project that you frequently work on?
Yeah, so in my current role, I'm a partnerships manager. And so I work with different community-based programs across the country to help them implement their programming for youth. And so a lot of it is really training them on different best practices to supporting young people, both sort of like in the post-secondary college and career realm, but also in mental health. And one project that I'm working on now is the development of a wellness resource guide that is going to start pretty local, like New York City resources, and then hopefully branch out more to regional and national resources for youth serving programs. So that's really exciting because it allows me to use the training that I got in grad school. So really excited about that.
That's really exciting. And is that something that you're doing on your own? Do you have people supporting you on that, or is that kind of your little baby?
It's a two-person project, so it's myself and another a colleague who are doing it. She not attacking it, but she is working on it from the lens of sort of like holistic practices with like Reiki and like herbalism, and I'm doing more like mental health supporting things. So we're using our specialties to sort of build this big guide.
Excellent, excellent. Um, and what do you enjoy most about your work?
Yeah, I mean, so what I love is that I still get to do counseling work in some way. Um, one example of that is that while I'm not working directly with youth, I'm working with folks who are working directly with youth. And I get to sort of train them on how to use some of like the counseling theories that I learned in school. So I still feel like I'm doing the same work that I was trained for. So there's that. But then I also love that I get to have a little bit more of like a national reach. I don't just have to focus a lot on New York City. And so I'm learning a lot of different states and different cities and how they work with young people.
Okay. And describe the type of person that you think would be a good fit for the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I'll think about it more in the macro, like in the counseling field. I think that people who are always open to learning new things. And we learned a lot in our program about being like culturally responsive and about being like to think about the work that we do in like a multicultural framing. And it's I think a given when you're from New York City like we are, but I learned that in a lot of different places that framing is not really necessarily the default. And so always being open to learning the students that you're working with, learning yourself and using both of those sets of knowledge to sort of like best show up for both your students and for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And is counseling something that you kind of always knew that you wanted to move towards, or did you
Yeah,
kind of come
not
to that place?
not consciously. So I always loved education. I was the kid who was at recess reading books while my friends were like playing games with each other. So I knew there was something to do with education that I loved, and there was something driving me towards that. But then I always found myself being someone who always wanted to help others in certain ways, and then people would always come to me and sort of like try to get advice from me and all those things. So at a certain point, once I was realizing um, that I was in need of a pivot, those things sort of came together, and that's how I learned about school counseling and how I entered the field.
Mm, okay. Um, and what do you know now that you wish you knew earlier in your career?
Yeah, I think about that often because I do feel like I've gone through a lot of like hoops and barriers to get to where I am today. And I still don't feel like I'm at my final place necessarily, but I wish I knew that the career journey is not a straight line necessarily. It can be for some people. I know people who I went to undergrad with, when I met them, they were saying, I'm going to be a lawyer. And today, more than 10 years later, they're like thriving in their careers as lawyers, but everyone's path is not necessarily linear. There are opportunities for you to learn from some of like the obstacles you go through. And so I wish I was a little bit easier on myself when I had to make sort of like changes and pivots throughout my career. So yeah, I think that would be it.
Okay, great. And did you have any mentors as you were kind of moving through your career path, or do you have a mentor now that has been helpful in your
Yeah,
career?
yeah. So my mentors are always connected to like the college I went to. So my first real mentor was in undergrad, but at Brooklyn College, Dr. Sarah Baquette is someone who I hold very dear to my heart. She's an amazing professor, an amazing human being,
Wow.
and she honestly helped me to navigate a lot of what I went through in the program, but then even afterwards. So my advice to students on the Zoom would be find someone. It doesn't have to be Brooklyn College, but Brooklyn College is full of amazing folks who would be more than happy and more than willing to support you on your journey. So it's really upon you to like take this step to reach out and meet people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. And we're going to open it up to questions, right, Mary?
Yep. Hi, Jada. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. So I'm going to start off with some questions that I have here. So you did briefly mention this, but what advice would you give a student who is unsure of what to major in, and what career path to go down?
Yeah, I think aside from what I said around like reaching out to professors, I would say try to be connected with your community to learn about what's available to you. I I was a first generation college student, so no one in my family could have supported me to learn anything about what I went through. And so I took it upon myself to research everything that I know at this point, basically. So I learned how to apply for FAFSA. I learned how to do all this stuff. I learned how to apply for jobs, how to interview, all those things. And so I would not necessarily say be like your own warrior and do it for yourself. But there are opportunities for you to learn for yourself and then seeing where you can create a network for yourself and tap into those resources. So it's a little bit of both about learning how to be self-reliant and self-sufficient, but then also realizing you don't have to do it all on your own and where can you tap into other people's expertise.
100%. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we do have a question in the chat. Can you become a counselor with major of healthcare policy and management?
So it depends. It depends. So there's the counseling field and the word counselor, I think is used differently in different contexts. So like as a school counselor, I can't necessarily open a private counseling practice and get clients for myself. Um, but within the healthcare policy field, there may be ways in which there are roles that are called counselor where you're supporting folks within that field. So if it's like patients or whatever it is, they may have titles and roles that say counselor that don't require the training that other forms of counselors need. So um, I would need to know more about specifically what within that policy and management field you're talking about, Azra. And if you want to chat with me like separately, we can definitely do that. But there are different sort of language that folks use about counselor without requiring the training necessarily.
Thank you. And yeah, as you mentioned, we'll get through it later, but maybe you could do LinkedIn chat or email,
Yeah.
whatever the best preference. Um, one question I do have for you is how can students make themselves competitive candidates in your field?
Yeah, I think so. When I did work in schools, I worked in charter schools, which is a totally different sort of environment than working in like a DOE public school. So my first piece of advice would be make yourself open to experiences in other types of schools. I know when I was in the counseling program, all of the counselors in my program wanted to work in DOE schools and wouldn't even consider necessarily working in a charter because stigma and all the things. But I would say open yourself up to different experiences. And then in order to make yourself competitive while you're applying for these jobs, try to get a lot of training, and that could apply to teachers and teacher candidates too. Try to find opportunities for either free trainings on specific topics related to your specialty area. Go to conferences, reach out to people who are running conferences if you can't go for yourself. Try to just find opportunities to learn because when you're interviewing, principals and other people like that are going to want to know what else you offer our school besides your degree and your education, but what trainings do you have that we can use in our environment that can help support our students?
Definitely.
That's a great point. And what was it like for you to move into counseling, that first role after you graduated from Brooklyn College? What was that like for you?
So I loved it, and then I obviously left. So maybe there were things that weren't that great. But for me, I loved working with students, and I loved working in the school environment that I was in. But I personally am an introvert, and it became like very like depleting and exhausting for me to remain in schools all day because you're not only working with adults, but you're working with hundreds of students at a time and families and all those things. So honestly, that's the reason I left, was because it was very hard for me to sustain that level of burnout in the long run. I'm not saying that folks on the Zoom think about leaving as soon as you go in, but for me, it was the right choice.
Right.
But I did love it because I got to do the work that I trained to do. And I may also go back at some point too in the future, just trying to figure out like the balance of how can I show up as my best self in this environment while also supporting my needs as a human being, you know?
Right. Really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
I do have another question for you. So one is, what is one action step students should take to get a head start in their career path?
I think it also depends on where you are in your educational journey. So if you're an undergrad or if you're like close to graduation, um, trying to get those trainings as much as possible as you're like going to apply soon. I would say research the field, research like the opportunities, the openings, all of those things. The main point that I would say would be try to understand the landscape that you're applying into, and figuring out how you as a person you are can support the school environment you want to get into. So always think about it from the lens of, I come with a wealth of knowledge, experience, and greatness. And how can my greatness support the school that I want to go into? And having that mindset helps you to go in with confidence, but also helps you to really show that you are an amazing person, period. And the school's lucky to have you, right? But you have to believe it first before you can show the school.
Definitely. And then I do have one more for you. How do you maintain an effective work-life balance?
Yeah, I'm learning more how to do that now. The role I work in now is mostly remote. So I get to choose my own morning. I get to do all the things that allow me to fill my cup each day. So I found an environment that, at least for right now, is one exactly what I need. But I've learned also to build in self-care practices for myself, so that the baseline of that is boundaries, like knowing when I can and cannot do something, and then being clear with others when I can't, to manage expectations, but then finding things that bring me joy. So I've returned to like reading novels, which I loved when I was a kid, and journaling and art and all those things. So for me, it's about finding like ritualizing practices for self-care and doing it consistently.
That's incredible. And a couple of other alums tonight had mentioned also that they're really clear about boundaries and that that's really important as well, especially in the work that you do with counseling. You can tend to just always give, 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 right? And then you feel depleted.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
right. So,
I had a student last year who struggled a lot with high school period, and he was in his senior year. And my job and my goal was to get him to graduation. But that often meant that I would be texting him his grandma 6 o'clock in the morning, making sure he's going to school. And it just didn't allow me the ability to have those boundaries. And so at least the opportunity that I'm in now, I'm getting that practice. So if and when I do go back into school systems, I'm able to sort of practice that in that sort of setting.
mhm. Excellent. So I think that was our last question for you, Jada. Thank you so, so much for being here
Of course.
tonight.
Yes.
Um, yeah, you shared a lot of great information, really interesting.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And anyone who is interested, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn to chat about any questions you have.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, have a great rest of the evening.
You
Thank you.
too. Stay warm.
Yes.
Yes, you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you were able to get a lot of your questions answered, and I hope you learned a lot from the alums that were here tonight. If anybody has any other questions, you could, for Mary or myself, you could put them in the chat. If not, you're welcome to leave, and thank you all so much for coming tonight.